them spell when police don't a market like theater, not a hell go mash up people stand and thief when them fell in gun. What them to the market man, what them a treat the cat man, what them to the peanut man, what them a treat the dirt man, what them a treat the sun man.
Boom! I mean, I say a couple to the flex they represent for Wayne Global TV. So I say, you know the code in the Wayne Global TV is what fully blessed on the 90 days. So I say, yeah man, to the fullest. Yeah man, make sure them log in to Wayne Global TV. So I say, check it out. So I say, one cup of flex. So I say, Wayne Global. When you watch you know, film a plan up and try if you put them on it and we head. But man, I live too long, them want Wayne Global fitted. To him juggle so smooth that them want him life for dread. I chew the bank, I like the miracle, but we ain't all about the bread. We open up in the ears and no listen when we said, cause we lyrics them so smooth like the linen on the bed. Them one with a fall, we living on the edge, I must say true, we make this them. We ain't Global TV, we are 90, and 90. Who Jaja bless, say no man can curse. Give me the Range Rover, who no drive yours. Boom! We ain't Global TV to the fullest one cup of excellence, see me?
Girl.
Jennifer, you hear anything about the election?
I'm not gonna get nothing. You hear nothing?
No, but they are out of the room. I watch some TV. Me, I listen to radio. Me, I hear about and nobody can't tell me how to win or no.
I don't understand this.
No, girl, that me I say me not understand. What are they?
We don't win.
Girl, me not tell you. Talk to me. Yes, girl. Kitchen. Who can beat him? God. Bro, God. Yes, man. The whole I put on the mouth from the Prime Minister. I mean, I tell her, son, I'm kill me, my Prime Minister. Bro, God. No, they are going to like say a national election, and it's a local government that have mortgage. I was starting in EOJ. Yeah. Can I look like a them win?
Oh, mercy.
I will call them win.
Isn't that how most of us feel? Confused, still wondering who win the election? Depends on who you talk to. The People's National Party won. Depends on who you speak to. The Jamaica Labour Party won. But the People's National Party have a right to be jubilant. Good evening and welcome to Global Television. This evening we're breaking ranks on Global Television. We're connecting donations this evening. Yes, you heard it. Global TV is collecting donations this evening. We have bucket for buy. We have battery for buy. We have push broom for buy. I wonder if we should buy buy them water boat. I'll give them shupata. But we're collecting donations this evening. This evening we are collecting donations because we have battery for buy, we have mop bucket, we have push broom and water boot to buy. Good evening, and welcome to Global Television. Thank you all for joining us. Good evening to those on the X, on Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook. Good evening to everyone and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. It's Thursday, the 29th of February, a leap year. Congratulations, happy birthday to all those who is celebrating their birthday once in a while today. Remember, we're collecting donation. We have stuff to buy up. Good evening to all my moderators. Good evening to all my family members. Good evening to my subscribers and supporters. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Veteran, big up yourself. Big up, big up, big up. Wagwan. Dorothy Elliott, good evening and welcome. Sunshine, good evening. Debbie Jarvis, good evening and welcome. Patricia Mattis, good evening and welcome. Good evening, Sunshine. How are you? Good evening and welcome. Anthony R. Good evening and welcome. Beat and Teach Wagwan. Good evening and welcome. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Natalia Freeman, how are you? Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining. Michelle Lewis Wilson, good evening and welcome. Good evening, everyone. Amazing Grace, good evening and welcome. Abena, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Sharon Powell, good evening and welcome. Carla Williams, good evening. Miranda Ruddock, Joan Brown, Rosemary Samuels, good evening and welcome. Rail, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Who else is here? Jamaican Foodie, good evening and welcome. Brittany, good evening and welcome. Paula, good evening and welcome. Audrey, good evening and welcome. Good evening, Pamela, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Good evening, Anthony, good evening and welcome. Monica, good evening and welcome. Precious, good evening. Pamela, Neil, good evening. Good evening, James. Prof. Gorgeous Lady, good evening. Good evening to everyone. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Jamaican Carlos, how are you, my brother? Good evening and welcome. Good evening. D.I. Easy Jerk on the World, I haven't seen you yet. D.I. Easy Jerk World, I haven't seen you yet, but good evening. Good evening, Tamiria. Tamira, good evening. Sharon, good evening. Blue Wave, good evening. Verona Stimson, good evening. Special, good evening. Rohan, good evening and welcome. Good evening, Peace Sunshine, good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Beulah, good evening. Marjorie, good evening to everyone and welcome. Elaine Turner, good evening. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome. The pigs have gone. We are collecting donation. But is that enough? Is it enough that Everett Warmington has gone? Is it enough that Dennis Meadows have gone? But should the police now act against both gentlemen? Dennis Meadows, aiding and abetting crime. Muma Lashley, disorderly conduct and whatever the charges for using bad word, indecent language, as they would have it. Because if it's me and you, we get charged for it. Does Dennis Meadows have an American visa? Do you, Mr. Meadows? Because if you have an American visa, the Americans would want back their visa now that you are encouraging chopping, scamming, Mr. Meadows. You're encouraging scamming and the elderly American citizens. I wonder if you have an American visa, Mr. Meadows. I wonder if Mr. Meadows, Monica Wells, I wonder if Mr. Meadows have an American visa. We don't even have to tell the Americans anything, Mr. Meadows. The embassy, the American embassy is right there. And they understand every little fangle we speak, as Timera says, junkin meadows. Because I'm go man we roll out a rum bar 3 o'clock a morning. Only man we roll out a rum bar 3 o'clock a morning, Mr. Meadows, would speak like that. Mr. Meadows behind the wife and children. But I'm going to threaten you tonight, Mr. Meadows. Oh, not violently, politically. One wouldn't do that. One doesn't. One's not a violent person. But I'm going to tell you, Dennis Meadows, because I know you have financial backers. And because you're eloquent, Mr. Meadows. You, Dennis Meadows, would want to go up for that seat as an independent. I dare you. I know you have financial backers, Mr. Meadows. I am quite aware of that. I am aware you have financial backers. Donovan Edwards, good evening. I'm aware, Mr. Meadows, you have financial backers, but I'm daring you to run for that seat in Chalani as an independent. I'm not too sure, but if you are just joining tonight, please like and share the live. And also tonight, we're collecting donations over here. Jen, good evening and welcome. We don't normally do that. But this evening we have extra expenses. We have push broom for buy. We have water boot for buy. We have battery. Call the China Dolly. Hey, call the man China Dolly tonight. We have battery to buy. We have water boot to buy. So we have extra expenses tonight. So because of that, we're collecting donations tonight. No, we don't give them power washer. Push broom. Power washer make the work to eat. Push broom, Natalia Freeman. Push broom. The most then we get is a hope. No. One. Hey, Jesus. One I carry the bucket with the water. And I throw the bucket with the water. D.I. is a jerk on the jerk well. Good evening. How are you, bro? One, I carry the bucket, throw the water, and the other using the push broom. We want bucket, push broom, water boot. Should we even give them water boot though? But let's be nice. Water boot. And we also need battery. So because of that tonight, we're collecting donations because we have extra expenses. Have anyone seen or heard of Nesta Morgan? Nesta Morgan battery run out. The battery run out at the dolly back. So we need donation tonight. We need donation tonight because the battery. The battery run out at the dolly back. And you can hear nothing. Nesta gone so. The Sport Channel, good evening. Good evening and welcome. First time seeing you on Global TV. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Does anyone have battery? Because Nesta Morgan back run out of battery. Because all of a sudden, Nesta Morgan is like a church bell. Town crier, Mr. Morgan. Social media town crier when Nesta Morgan was hungry. Social media town crier, always a definite with narrative. The town crier said this.
The
persons who you saw in Maypen today are comrades from Woodall, comrades from Moko, and several other places. They could not mobilize enough people from Moko. What it says to you is that the people of Moko do not believe in Romain Morris. Romain Morris has crossed the floor, which is his right. But I will say to you as Member of Parliament, he will never win Moko Division as long as I'm a Member of Parliament. And I cross the floor, which is his right. But I will say to you as Member of Parliament, he will never win Moko Division as long as I'm a Member of Parliament. He will never win Moko Division as long as I'm a Member of Parliament. Member of Parliament, he will never win Moko Division as long as say to you as Member of Parliament, he will never win Moko Division as long as I'm a Member of Parliament, and I put that down.
Take it up. Take it up. Can you put it down? So take it back up. Take it up. Take it up, Nesta, because you want battery in your back. Take it up. Because you say you put that down. Take it back up, because it never work. Egg pan face. Butu. Zilch. Nesta, man.
The persons who you saw in Maypen today are comrades from Woodall, comrades from Moko, and several other places. They could not mobilize.
Maybe the next few days we're going to hear that they bring in people from Woodall and all sorts to come vote at Moko, because you know the JLP, them always coach us to think what they want us to think. Abe.
The persons who you saw in Maypen today are comrades from Woodall, comrades from Moko, and several other places. They could not mobilize enough people from Moko. What it says to you is that the people of Moko do not believe in Romain Morris. Romain Morris has crossed the floor, which is his right. But I will say to you as Member of Parliament, he will never win Moko Division as long as I'm a Member of Parliament, and I put that down.
Right back down your throat next tomorrow. Right back down your throat. The youth hold it and stop it. Can you imagine a junior stop his manager's word right back down his throat? You should resign because you're a junior. If you're in an office with your junior and your junior stuff your word down your throat in front of the board, you might as well tender your resignation before the board meeting finishes. You might as well, Mr. Morgan, tender your resignation. Because notice, JLP and their violence, their badman government, their arrogance, their bullyism, their dictatorism, their despotism. This is how they rule by power and control. That Nesta Morgan can be telling you, the voters, as long as I'm MP in this country, he will never win that seat. And Everett Warmington is telling you, the people, that when my councillor win, I will suffocate the People's National Party of money, of funds, in order to do his work. Dean Jones told you, if you don't vote for me, bullet for you. Remember the Tegereg. Remember the Tegereg who left go all the way up a Miss Lady yard. Go tell Miss Lady, say, she make a wrong time.
I can make it in a dark so much years. And from a child to him, never stay 5 minutes, then come fix the light. And him you want because we see the needs of the people, and see what the wants of the people, and see what the people they want to be done.
Good job.
Good job. You see,
Council candidate for balance.
to balance and into Washington.
A few moments later.
Right.
How comes you come by and say Buju fix this life?
Good. But you don't call me in politics. Don't call me in politics.
You still sit there and not telling any
Don't call me
lie.
in politics.
You
Don't call
made
me
a
in.
video and say Buju fix the life. Let me show you.
Don't call me. Me sit down here Monday evening and see floor truck come on there. See floor truck come on there.
Are you this?
Yes, and I say so much years the light dead and nobody no come fix it.
So who fixed the light?
Me don't know, me tell it, me tell
Alright,
Mr.
you say
Float
like,
Truck.
oh, you say you don't know. Let me tell you now.
Mr. Float Truck, give me chance. Mr. Float Truck come up here. And me say, Rod, them have put on me light and I put on my phone and something now. And after then, me see the light come on.
After who gone?
After the truck gone, with the sitting them, me see light come on.
Alright, well, let me make it clear to you. It is Mario Hardley paid $35,000 to fix this light. No, Miss Faye, listen what I'm saying. You made a wrong talk, but me the here to tell you.
Threats, violence, threat of gun violence, intimidation, vote buying in broad daylight. Does this election show us, what does this election show us of the regime that is in power? What does this election show of the regime that is in power? I don't hope these broadcasting people don't trouble me over them things, but Cliff Hughes went on the rant today. Not today, I think it was yesterday. Yes, yesterday. Cliff Hughes went on the rant.
Counting of ballots should be completed today. And I must tell you that the political operatives and the party leaders and their chief lieutenants and lieutenants are keenly watching the counts taking place across the island, because the results are so close. Yes, the gaps, the margins narrow, that people are winning seats by fewer than 10 votes, 20 votes, 40 votes, less than 50 votes. For example, it is now basically confirmed that the governing Jamaica Labour Party has lost the St. Mary municipality. Remember, on Tuesday evening, on Monday evening, yesterday was Tuesday, Monday evening, it was listed St. Mary as one of the corporations that the Labour Party had either won or was leading in. Now, following the final count yesterday, they've lost St. Mary. And that is not a surprise. Rght pollsters had picked up that the Labour Party had lost significant ground in St. Mary. And that's now been confirmed. And as I said, it follows the official counting of the ballots.
So you're realizing that Cliff didn't make a blunder. The figures that we were given on Monday night was the correct figures, no matter what swindling or going around the corner they want to do. But listen to him a bit more. There's a lot that he said, but I'm not going to play everything for them. Come tell me, Mary, use them stuff.
Ballots. And based on what people in the parish are telling me, they lost St. Mary because they lost the Gale division of Western St. Mary. The Gale division of Western St. Mary, that's a constituency of the JLP chairman, Bobby Montague, and a JLP strong area. I wouldn't say stronghold, but it is a strong area of support for the Jamaica Labour Party, Gale. You recall the Prime Minister being in Gale at 2 o'clock in the morning. He was running late and some of the people there waited for him in that piece of video that went all over the place.
Rolling
It was in Gale.
Bell.
And now they've lost Gale. And it is now also clear that the Prime Minister and the people, the Labourites in Gale, were there waiting until late. And the Prime Minister went there at 2 o'clock because they knew they were in trouble in that part of St. Mary. I told you some time ago, watch where the party leaders are going. That's a good guide, yeah, as to where they're strong, where they're weak, especially weak and need some shoring up of support. And I should tell you, the final results will be known today, but the post-mortem analyses, yes, have begun in both parties. Both parties, at the activist level of the parties, they have started to do their analysis and do their, what you call, next steps. What to be done now? Because we now have actual votes. These are not polls anymore, statistical polling. These are actual votes. Just under 600,000 Jamaicans went to the polls, albeit only 29% of those eligible went to the polls. A low turnout. And as a
This is where I'm going to agree with Cliff with the risk to our democracy with this low voter turnout.
Gentleman said to me this morning, nobody won this election. Jamaica lost. When we are at a place where only 29% of our people are bothering to go out, the country lost. 71% of Jamaicans didn't bother themselves to get involved in local elections that were fought as if they were general elections. The intensity of the campaigns. And yet still, 71% of Jamaicans didn't bother. The gentleman said to me this morning, Cliff, we're in trouble. And I've been saying it, we are in trouble. When 71% of your voting public says, I'm not going, I'm not participating. So let us begin there. Yeah. And talking of St. Mary, one of the leaders of the Labour Party in St. Mary is the mayor, the outgoing mayor, Richard Creary. Yes?
On
and
the green
they had him on
feather
this
on
morning on Nationwide. And the former mayor, the councillor for the Richmond division in the parish, made a statement, made comments that we're going to play for you because of the significance. He didn't say anything that we didn't know. Let me say that up front. But coming from an experienced practicing politician as Mayor Creary, and by the way, you remember that Blue Dot poll when we asked Jamaicans to assess the performance and to rate the parish councils, the municipal corporations across the country? Creary came out on top. 29% rated him as a performer and his council. And that was the highest rating. 29%. Oh, ironically, it just occurred to me, the voter turnout was 29%. And I remember saying, 29% is nothing to be comfortable about. It's really the best of a bad lot. But Creary came out on top. Yes? And he's crediting the loss of the JLP to the PNP in St. Mary as, he says, the voters, especially the younger voters, are now very transactional, very vulgar in demanding that, listen, you want my vote? You have to pay me for it. That's what he was saying. And I've been saying this since Monday afternoon. When I speak to the politicians across the country, they were telling us that, listen, this demand for being paid for your vote is now rampant and widespread. One MP told me this morning from central Jamaica that, listen, her voters, her supporters were insisting, we're not moving until you pay away. And she said that in many instances, they were telling her the other people them giving so much, so you have to match it. That's where we are. That's where we are.
If our politicians were doing their job, vote buying island-wide from both sides of the coin. But this is a system of politics that has been entrenched by the political class in our system, as well as compound with lack of education, lack of general and political education. 70% of us are disengaged from the system. This is telling you that even though there's such a wide-ranging apathy, with political education, there is a major vacuum. There is a vacuum for a third party. Joseph Patterson messed it up. There is a vacuum for a third party. The issue we have in our country is lack of hope in the current political system of our country. Lack of political education and lack of general education to do with our politics and how one should see their politics, how one should vote, how policy matters over personality. Because what we have as our political system is a tribal political adversarial system where you have people like Dennis Meadows and Everett Warmington. Our political system needs to change. It is for us, the people, to call for that change to happen. The reason being, this is not working. It has gotten to the stage where the day politicians decide not to pay for votes, none of us, or a lot of us across the country, aren't willing to engage in the democratic process because we have been trained. It's been normalizing us. It has become a self-conscious prejudice. I'm voting for the party that pays me. Anybody can dip in them pocket. You see how much there is about just this one election to investigate? Do you see? Are you now realizing how much there is of just this election process? Of just a result disclosure process? Do you understand how much there is at the moment to investigate? My question, as I keep asking, who at the moment do we complain to? Do you think Everett Warmington, lack of confidence and low confidence is a big problem in our political spheres as well with our people? Do you think Everett Warmington resigning from the cabinet, Dennis Meadows been taken off the caretaker role in Chilani for the People's National Party? Do you think that is enough? Or should Dennis Meadows be charged for aiding and abetting? And should Everett Warmington be charged for disorderly conduct and what you call the thing? Indecent language? Why are they treated differently? Why are the police? Why is the Jamaica Constabulary Force cheating politicians differently from they would cheat us? Popcorn couldn't get away with it. No other entertainer couldn't get away with it. Only their friends can get away with something of such. Only their friends can get away with something of such. But I'm going to let me play a little bit more of Cliff, because Cliff went on a rant yesterday.
And Query said it this morning, and I want you to hear what Query says. The post-mortem has begun. Why is it that only 29% of the voters eligible to vote bothered to turn up? And who are these 29% of voters? As I said to you yesterday, it's mainly the urban poor, the rural poor, the urban and rural unemployed, or working class on fixed incomes, yes, usually between about 30 and 50, 55 years old. They're non-professionals with a fair bit of what former Professor at Mona, Don Robotham, described about 15, 20 years ago, the lumpens. And I remember Robotham coming under attack for it, because he made the point that our politics was at a place where, unlike in previous decades, where you had a high degree of participation, not only in terms of political organization and leadership, but at the community level, where you had your teachers, your lawyers, your doctors getting involved, your professionals, your lower middle class, even some from the top echelons of society were involved, not only as voters, but as organizers. Yes, that we had begun by the turn of the 21st century to lose that. And what we were left with are the two major political parties being populated, yes, and largely being influenced by people who Robotham identified as lumpens, who virtually had captured the parties. Yeah? And we're seeing it in terms of turnout, in terms of the quality of the leadership, at the organizational level, the base. Yeah? And listen to Query what he said this morning.
Although I won my division, there are young persons that you assist throughout the period of time, and then on election day they will say they need money to vote, and I am not one that believes in doing that. If I assist you when you have a need, then I would expect that when the time comes for you to reciprocate, you would vote for me. And I believe this happened in many of the other divisions. If it happened in my own division, I can imagine it happening in other divisions.
So you face demands for money?
Division, I know a number of party supporters who did not vote, and I'm sure this month.
Ask Darrell Vaz. Darrell Vaz spent 14 million on Monday buying votes because he saw that he was going to lose a chunk of Portland. And by 1 o'clock, Darrell rolled in. And then just a cat of money all across Portland. So
having lost the corporation, they would have regretted it. But it is now too late.
So you face
I can think of many other divisions where we had similar challenges.
So you face demands for money for people to come out and vote?
I can speak to my division, yes. And I believe.
Or could this be a JLP Nesta running out a battery hidden conspiracy? Because if the JLP doesn't win the election, let's say the broke pocket PMP them whenever they even have money for campaign well for themselves. Bought the election because PMP have money to pay. Could this be the narrative? Ambulance pass. Could this be the narrative that Nesta Morgan and the Jamaica Labour Party is trying to push us along that line to say then the only way that the Jamaica Party could have lost the election is because the People's National Party went across the country on a vote-buying campaign? Really? Sophie Bell Henry, good evening. Nerissa, how are you? How are you? Good evening and welcome. Navlet Samuels, good evening. Good evening. Raymond, good evening. Mr. Flex, good evening. Starboy, good evening. Douglas Allen, good evening. Angela Musenden, good evening. Good evening, good evening. I see a few people who have joined. Good evening and welcome. Good evening, Lilith Foster, good evening and welcome. Kirk Edwards, good evening. Pauline Dixon, good evening. Good evening, all, and welcome. Verna Shaw, good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Good evening and welcome. Good evening. Anthony R., good evening. How are you? Good evening. Good evening and welcome. Noreen Robinson, good evening and welcome. Good evening. Thank you all for being a part of the Global TV family. ASMR, LOL. Sorry, good evening and welcome. Yvonne Green, good evening. Marsha Grant, good evening. Good evening. Delroy Henry, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Could it be that the Jamaica Labour Party is painting a narrative? Josiah 123, good evening and welcome. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Gloria Morris, good evening. Could this be a narrative? Because Mr. Nesta Morgan threatened Morris that him can't win the election as long as him an MP in Jamaica. Stacy, good evening and welcome. Mr. Flex, good evening. Mr. Nesta Morgan, after threatening the young man because Diane Henry, good evening and welcome. Him threatened the young man, says as long as him an MP in the country, the young man can't win. All of a sudden, the young man win. There is all sorts of narrative out there. I'm not going to jump to anything. I know how Nesta Morgan campaign works. I know a lot of the people them when Nesta Morgan pay for the narrative. I know a lot of the people them when they will have the private page out there for Nesta Morgan. So while Nesta Morgan battery run out, Nesta Morgan can't come on social media come push narrative when all of his promises, in promise the policy paper last Saturday morning, still haven't arrived yet, Nesta. After you made that promise, I think last Wednesday, last Thursday, nobody seen or heard anything out of you. But we have come to the conclusion. That's why we're collecting donation tonight. We have come to the conclusion that we will need to buy a battery for your back because the battery run out of the dolly back next time. Tone cry. Parish church bell. Can you imagine the Jamaica Labour Party winning this election? The town crier. The town crier would be all over social media ringing church bell. But all of a sudden, the battery run out. So that's one of the places where the donation is going. If you were here this morning, you must remember that we were doing Hagpen referee on Global TV this morning. We were doing Hagpen referee this morning on Global Television. So now that the hags are being pushed to the pen and out of our parliament and political party system, we need water boot for Dennis Meadows. We need water boot for Edward Warmington. Who you, the people, decide who are going to have the push broom and push the hag shit, and who are going to have the bucket of water throw in the hag pen. You all decide that. But we want bucket, we want push broom, we want water boot, and we want battery. This is what your political class has turned into. This is why the people don't see the relevance of voting. People don't see the relevance of engaging Ronald B. Good evening and welcome. They don't see the relevance of engaging because for 50 years and more, it's much of the same. Our roads remain the same. Our water supply in colonization seem to have worked better in a lot of communities, particularly mine, than it is working now. Roads are not fixed. Your gullies on your drains are not fixed. No development in your town centers. Your roads are not being debushed. Your roads are not being paved. There's a lot of questions to be had coming out of this election. The political system we engage, how ones get to local or central government. We need to dismantle. We need to dismantle the old boys club system. Fuck away with that now, beg your pardon. It is what is and is continually destroying our system. Because to get past the old boys club to become an MP or a councillor, it's a challenge. That system of the old boys club system doesn't allow people a lot of the time who knows the community, who knows the people, who understand the services that the community require, the lacking of the infrastructure within that community. But because of the old boys club system, and Mark Golden, you should take lesson from this. When you're replacing the orange hub, Mr. Golden, what you need to do is go to Trelawney and sit down and talk to the people of Trelawney and see who they want to represent them. The Old Boys Club of promising donors a seat must be ridden off. The Old Boys Club system of because it is my friend or my daughter or my son or my whoever they are related to me are in feather case, feather sweetheart them can get council seat. Good riddance of feather. But the Old Boys Club structure of politics, we the people, one of the top weight pan thieving criminal politicians, we do things for now. The Old Boys Club system need to be dismantled, where people can get to central and local government because of their competences and because of their service. People see that they do a lot of community service for them. They're always there to help people out and guide them and all sorts. Those are the people who you want at your local government. Not they don't want them though. They want them we can understand policy. We don't want nobody to go tangle up themselves in a number. And we don't want nobody to go up to go say resilient and say resilient. No, not that. We want people to be able to invite you, the people, to town hall and debate the policy issues. The policy issues that they're coming to you with to develop your local townships and communities. That is a major part of the disengagement. That is a major part of the disengagement. One of it is another part of it. It is the entrenched tribalism from the 70s onward. That entrenched tribalism with a low literacy rate is devastating Iceland Williams to our democracy, because our people tend not to understand. Our people tend not to understand the political system. They only understand tribalism. We need to educate tribalism out of our people. We need to go on an education drive, civic education. I don't know what country mash up. Civic education, we can achieve that through civic education. We in the communities and in the household, we can tear down the tribal barriers of politics that we harbor in our community and our household, and start focusing on what will develop the family, what will develop the community, and be beneficial for the country by extension. This type of politics is not working, people. See where it has gotten us. See where it has gotten us to the point where we had a local government election from Monday. Tomorrow is Friday. VM, how are you? And we're not quite sure. BCA Smith, good evening and welcome. I'm just going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I will want to play for you. You know the dunceman at the ECJ. I will want to play something from the national dunce, because I don't understand a whole marking book, but Global TV will return after the break.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again. What we gonna eat no money, what we at you, eat no at you. Go be money, miss we eat the yellow correct you. Use the youth, the money, waste my most man statue. Say me like a catch you, but we got in a figure you. Take this bit of money, God and say that is not you. One day the man above him up, him a got up. Too much eat in the kitchen, some a fly well like a patu. When singers and DJs and social media's coming at you. It burn me, 300% free. It burn me, garbage pile of the day. It burn me, give the teacher them raise. It burn me, I see corruption please. It burn me, mash down the people them house. It burn me, every day appear arms out. It burn me, appear money them a thief. It burn me, and them a sell out the beach. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again. For me say big up all the charities and all of the givers. Some a go like say them powerful, me no make a bigger. The urgent the promises, none of them not deliver. Cut up the youth and rap and they down in our river. Member bowl only and they lie them tell. Corruption smell and the pocket them swell. When police don't a market like Satan out of hell, go mash up people start like thief when them sell. It burn me. Or they treat the market man. It burn me. Or them a treat the cat man. It burn me. Or they treat the peanut man. It burn me. Or them a treat the dirt man. It burn me.
Thank you and welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you all for joining. Welcome back. I'm going to play you a bit from TVJ.
By the PNP's Dennis Meadows and the JLP's Everald Warmington. They've both apologized, but is that where it should end? First,
it was given the returning out. We need to understand. It goes to Mr. Brown. There seems to be there are concerns about the way in which the votes were counted this election, the wrong declaration of Clarendon, what seems to be the confusion about who won St. Mary initially first. What went wrong with Clarendon, firstly? There's no difference in counting this time around as against other elections. I think we need to understand, and the public need to understand, it goes through two processes. On election night, you get what is known as the preliminary count. The preliminary count is what happens after the close of polling at an individual polling station, where the presiding officer, along with the indoor agents, count the ballots and then tally the votes and then pack everything in a ballot box and transport that to the returning officer. And then what the returning officer does at the night of election, they then take all the number, transcribe the number that is on the ballot box, and they end up with what is known as the preliminary count. That was done, and the result was announced on the night, on Monday night, as it relates to the preliminary count. Then we embarked on another phase, and this is dictated by the law. The law requires us to do a final count. The final count entails, and I think the public need to understand, that what happens in the final count, and it has never taken place, and there's a narrative going around that it is slow. The final count has never been completed in Jamaica in 24 hours. So the process entails that the returning officer, in the presence of the agents at the counting center on the second day, which was Tuesday, and at times the agent representative is a battery of lawyers. What they do, the returning officer opens a ballot box, then examine every document, most of the document in the ballot box, including the poll books, another thing, the unused ballots, etc., etc. And then they begin, in most cases, the count of the ballot. What it means is that they examine every single ballot that is put in the ballot box. And at times,
the time that it takes to count a ballot in that situation, sometimes it takes longer than the norm because everybody is looking to see whether it is properly marked, if there's an issue. And therefore, sometimes it takes time. And therefore, that process has to be completed. We cannot circumvent that process in order to speed up the count. And therefore, it takes some time. And that's what we're going through.
So then, what happened in Clarendon?
Clarendon, and it happens. In other words, what we remember again, on Monday night, you have a preliminary count. There are times when they begin to do the final count, maybe there was an error in terms of the addition, etc., etc. What happened in Clarendon is that in a particular box, one of the candidates was given the wrong was given the wrong number of votes, and therefore it flips around. So the person who got the highest number in that particular box, the correct thing was that he should have gotten the low figure, and that changes the mix or the calculation.
And this was in the Ainton division. So which candidate initially got the wrong number of votes? Like how did it go? On which side?
The PNP candidate got the wrong number.
Which would have declared that candidate the winner
on the night, on the preliminary count night.
On the preliminary count, and then it was
switched around. So therefore, in the final count, the correction was made, and then the JLP candidate won that division.
Okay, what happened with St. Mary?
St. Mary, it was the calculation and the addition that took place. Right, that caused after that count was completed, and you examine what was spoiled, examine what was acceptable by the returning officer, and then remember the returning officer at the point of counting is the final person in that room that accepts what is a good ballot or what is not a good ballot. So doing those checks and those reconciliation, the numbers change, and that's what happens in the SM area.
And then now we go to way out west in Hanover. Initially we had heard 7-0 to the PNP, then we heard 6-1, and now 7-0 again to the PNP. What happened there?
It happens in the sense that the count, and then we need to remember again, when you go to a final count, you examine every ballot, so the numbers will change and they will fluctuate from time to time within the thing. There's nothing that says, again, as a country, you need to understand, it's a preliminary count that takes place on the Monday, the night of election. And in doing your final checks, or the final check, the numbers can change. The key thing that the numbers change based on what is legitimate ballot, and therefore that's what happened why you had that fluctuation in Hanover.
Especially given what we're seeing now with the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, I have to ask you this question: is it the practice of the Electoral Commission to declare a municipal corporation won by one party because they got the popular vote, even though the number of divisions are tied?
No, we are not declaring that. What we're declaring now, we are declaring the number of electoral division that each political party would have won in the election. In terms of who take control of the municipality, the law is clear. If you read the 8th of the Europa, it clearly outlines what happened whenever there's a tie. Whenever there's a tie, the party with the popular vote will automatically takes charge of the mirror seat in that electoral division.
And just for regular parlance so the average man can understand, would the Electoral Commission consider that corporation won by the party who has the popular vote?
It's not a matter of the Electoral Commission will consider it. The law clearly defines the process, what happens when there's a tie. And therefore, it's not a matter of accepting or not accepting. The law says whenever there's a tie, the person who takes over the chairmanship of that municipality is a party that has a popular vote, the majority of the popular vote.
The general secretaries of both the JLP and the PNP, speaking to Dion Jackson Miller on Beyond the Headlines yesterday, said that their confidence in the EOJ remains. We've seen some people on social media, however, raising concerns about the integrity.
Remember, before we continue, remember when he said to Nationwide that it was deliberate in holding on to the result of the election because commercial partners like Cliff Hughes and others who paid for it need to monopolize and by extension profiteer on it. Listen to the answer he's going to give in relation to the same thing to this reporter.
Of the electoral office this time around, can I respond to some of those concerns?
We work hard here. I think people need to understand the process. I think some.
If you're looking for a quick and easy way to get
comments, if you look at the comments, I think we some members of people don't understand the process, and therefore they're able to pass certain comments. But certainly we ensure and we do whatever we do as dictated by the law. And we'll never resile from that. We're not going to do anything that is not dictated to us by the law. And you can, and one of the major body which we rely upon here is the CAFE, the Observer Grouping. And we have always been in the house by the Observer Grouping. And CAFE came out, despite some issues they had, they came out and endorsed the election itself. And they did say this election was fair and transparent based on the observation of the activities that took place in the election.
As you mentioned, CAFE, I'm happy you brought them up. That's the Citizens Action for Free and Fair Elections.
Okay.
No, they raised concerns, the head raised concerns yesterday as well and beyond the headlines, and even on the day of the election, saying that in about 11% of the polling stations, observers weren't allowed to observe throughout the day. They were given specific time periods, and they had serious concerns about that, which brought into question the issue of training of your election day workers. How do you respond to some of those concerns that electoral workers weren't properly trained, which saw pretty much 1 in 10, more than 1 in 10 polling station not allowing the CAFE observers to do their jobs?
And we do. That's part of our training. We do train them in terms of the rights of the observer. It's an arrangement that we have, and it's an understanding that they should be allowed to free access, certainly to our police station, because at the end of the day, we want their stamp of approval in terms of what we do. We coming out of that exercise, coming out of the issues that took place on Monday. I've had a discussion with the chairman of CAFE, Ms. Baston. In fact, I've also apologized on behalf of the Commission and the Electoral Office in terms of what happened. There's a scheduled meeting sometime next week between myself and Ms. Baston and her team. And we're going to look at how best what we need to do, not to have a repeat of what took place on Monday.
In terms of some of the numbers coming out, the actual voting on the night, there were concerns, widespread concerns about how slow it was.
Listen to his answer now.
What do you attribute that to?
There are some issues in time. I'm trying to get a report. There are some technological issues, but there are some issues outside of that. If you what was brought to my attention, and I said before, with a report, is that there, for example, in Hanover, West Portland, and St. James, the significant amount of rain, etc. So it took some time for the boxes to be brought into the counting center, and that also impacted on the speed at which the result came out. But suffice to say, by about 10:30, 11 o'clock, the country was aware in terms of which way it was trending.
There were concerns that essentially that the EOJ sold the results to media, and there are some people calling for that to stop because they felt that the results weren't being released in a timely manner to the public. How do you respond to those concerns that the EOJ sold the results to the media essentially, and for them to do?
Well, not matter selling the data to some media. That issue, as I said, we're looking at that issue. We looked at our report. We're going to do a review, certainly, when we do the review of this election. I think some prior discussion I've had with our chairman. We're looking to see how best to address that matter that is in there in the public domain. But you'll get a response from us shortly in terms of the approach we'll take going forward.
You addressed the issue of CAFE, but there were concerns from the media as well about them being allowed to observe. I remember speaking with my colleague from the Gleaner, Erica Virtue, who raised concerns. You're aware of some of the concerns that some media person were expressing?
Right. Well, we have thought in the past, I think we had a MOU between us and the Press Association of Jamaica. So there were some issues there. It is a matter of us reinforcing to our people, so in terms of, and some of those issues that she might have had or the individual might have had would have come from more from the external people our operation. But what we have sought to do is to have that sort of MOU in place to govern the activity of the media, because we want the media to ensure, as part of the observer pool, to monitor what is happening and then report to the wider public in terms of our performance and activity. And so we continue to look at that, how best we can address that situation so that we don't have a repeat going forward.
Any concerns expressed to you by any other political parties?
Nothing that was brought to my attention. Certainly on Monday, we set up what is known as the Election Center, which is a grouping of persons, including critical stakeholders, that is the police, the army.
As the Easy Jerk said, enough of the Diddy, Bobo, Dudu. For just the fact that he cannot give a clear explanation to anything, does he have the credibility to regulate your electoral process? Arlene Foster, Millie McBean, Kenny Lee, Rohan Williams. Who else has arrived? Does this man, David, good evening, Lilith Lockerbie, does this man have the credibility, Johnny Brown, does this man have the credibility to direct your electoral services, Glennox Smith? When for days we are yearning just to get a straight answer. Kazmata Rhythm Killers, welcome. Thank you very much for joining the family. Elder Fletcher, good evening and welcome. Good evening. Just the fact that this man cannot provide us any form of clarity from Monday night. Every time since Monday night this man speaks, he rather confuses the public more, who is yearning to get the result of the election or an understanding of what is going on. Even in this explanation he was given, the amount of Bubba, Dudu, and Bibi is a holder. Good evening and welcome. One cannot understand or follow whatever he was saying or explaining because it was all over the place. It wasn't a coherent, structured sentence. Any of the question he gets asked, he just mumbled and fumbled all over the place. There was no coherent, string-together answer. What is going on with this election, Nicola Pitt? Who do we complain to? Is the question. Yes, the Prime Minister would have you believe that the same old fuddles, these same old group of fuddles that messed up our electoral process, it's in their office that the office of the Ombudsman is in. Do you all see the dictatorial regime that we're heading into? And the people, if they don't think their political system needs changing, where do you think your democracy is going? Not just the AOJ, Nicola. Our entire political system needs revamping. Enough of the old boys club politics, Fabian Anderson, JP. Enough, Yvonne Green, of the old boys, hereditary. Give a seat because I'm a donor. Give a seat because it's my friend. Give a seat because it's a bad man of a backing. Our entire political structure needs an overhaul. We cannot continue every election cycle to be repeating the same thing, but in a downward spiral. The apathy is getting higher. The voter turnout is getting lower. Our democracy is under a bought and sold system. Do you think this is going to end well if we allow it to trend the way it is going? Do you think this will end well if we allow it to trend the way it is going? But all of us must continue to call for the arrest and charge of Dennis Meadows for inciting violence and for Edward Warmington for disorderly conduct and indecent language in public. I want to thank you all tonight for listening to my rant. The protection of all of us democracy, it's up to all of us individually and collectively. If we don't protect what our forefathers fought hard, gave their life to secure and protect, that this, our generation, can do. Good evening and welcome. That this, our generation, could stand up freely and speak and demand our right on the street, have our freedom of expression, conscience, thought, religion, or right to life, which we never had or never used to have. One could just take it from us. If we don't maintain what we inherited and build on it, the only other option is the risk of losing it. This is where Global TV ends us tonight. Join us back here tomorrow, where we will continue the Global TV election campaign until there is a result from...
This is Global TV election results coverage. This is Global TV
Thank you very much for being
coverage.
here with us on Global TV
Global
this
TV
evening.
election results
Have
coverage.
a pleasant night, and we will definitely see you back here tomorrow. Thank you very much.